Hello everyone. So the next talk is overview of the gaming utils in Debian by Stephan Lachnit. So it's a pre-recorded talk and we'll have some time for the Q&A. So please feel free to use the Etherpad for the question. So let's begin.
Hi and welcome to my talk about gaming utilities and Debian. In this talk I want to talk about a couple of gaming utilities and their state upstream as well as in Debian. So a little bit about myself. I'm contributing to Debian for about a year, and I'm also co-maintaining the gamemode package, and I recently got approved as DM. So here are the utilities I want to talk about. So on the left side you see packages which are hopefully coming soon to Debian or are already inside. So there will be Lutris, MangoHud, vkBasalt, GOverlay, Piper and gamemode. And on the right side a couple of projects I find interesting, but I haven't done any serious packaging yet. I also want to talk about some other topics which are related. So one of the more important ones is the Vulkan Layer library location problem, which actually affects quite a lot of these utilities. Then the games section in Debian, as well as the games category in the desktop menu specification from FreeDesktop. So the first package I want to talk about is probably the most prominent one, is Lutris. So it's an open source gaming platform, or basically a library for all your games. Linux natives, Wine games, DOS games, just everything. The development is pretty steady, I would say. There are a couple of outside contributors, so in a healthy state, and it's quite easy to help. So it's possible to write translations, and it's also possible to contribute installers. So basically, a one-click installation of a game, which maybe requires a bit more complicated setup. The Debian state of Lutris is actually a long story. So the first ITP was in 2014. Most got uploaded to new, but it actually got rejected and there was no new effort. And it was some copyright problem. And I gave it another shot about a year ago. I made a rather big PR to update the entire copyright file. Lutris is a Ubuntu native package, so it already had one, but it was not used. All the Lutris bundles a lot of icons, and for certain runners, and there was a separate copyright file for all these icons, but it wasn't really up to date, and I put it all together in a Debian copyright file, but it still got rejected because one icon had a non-DFSG compliant license. So that was actually quite a big problem, and the current solution from Upstream is to get the package inside Debian is to not ship these icons by default, but now they are part of the runtime, which will Lutris download in your home directory. It's a bit of a workaround, so I'm not entirely sure if Lutris can go into main, because it still downloads these by default without asking, but else everything is out of the way to get the upcoming 058 release into Debian. So let me give you a quick overview of Lutris. Here you see the main window, which lists all your installed games. You can also do it in a proper list if you want. And here on the left side, we have different sources. So for example, just general Lutris runners, games from GOG, from Humble Bundle, and from Steam. You can connect your accounts to them. So for example, on Humble Bundle, I don't currently have any games installed. And if I press Ctrl H, I can see all the programs on my account I can install. Same for Steam. And now I want to show you an example how to add a Steam game you already have installed. So for example, Among Us, I already have it installed. So I click on Among Us, then add installed game. Now you have to select the runner. So here we select just Steam, and then we're going on game options. We need to insert the application ID, which is a little bit odd, but we just go to store page on Steam, and this little number here is the Steam app ID. Just kind of paste it in here, and we click on save. And now we have here Among Us, and we can play it. If you don't have a game installed and you want to install a new game, you can also do that. So for example, AudioServe, just click install, and you have different options. And here we just click Steam Proton version, install. Okay, now it says installation complete. It's not actually entirely correct. When we now click on play, what will happen is just a normal Steam installation will pop up, and I'm just gonna remove it. The nice thing about Lutris is you can configure your games. So for example, I can stop Steam after the game exits if you don't want Steam to run in the background, or just tons of other things. So for example, enable MangoHud, ACO, gamemode, NVIDIA Prime Render offload, so you don't, you can really easy set it here instead of editing the launch command on Steam. And the icons I talked about earlier, just to show you them, these are these icons here for the runners. Next up is MangoHud. So it's a performance overlay for OpenGL and Vulkan. So you can see FPS, frame times, GPU, CPU load. The development is pretty active, mainly by 2 people, but there are also a couple of outside contributors. The only thing is that Upstream is sometimes messy, so they include a lot of headers. Sometimes the installers do weird things. So for example, at the beginning, the architecture was hard-coded, but it's pretty nice to work with them. So yeah, it's actually not that big of a problem. Yeah, the Debian status, I have a working Arch-independent package. Now, why Arch-independent is important here, as we will discuss it later. But it's basically done, the package, but there's some problems with the copyright file. Yeah, I haven't taken a deep look at it. I'll probably try to resolve that soon, but yeah, else it's basically ready. It has the Vulkan Layer library location problem, which I'll talk about later. So let's take a look at MangoHud. On Vulkan, you can enable it with an environment variable. So MangoHud equals 1, vkcube, for example. Yeah, for some reason my GPU doesn't work here. I guess because it's too old, but yeah, it works just fine. On OpenGL, you need to launch a script. So, for example, with glx gears, just call MangoHud glx gears, yeah, and it should work. Where it doesn't work always, if we do the same thing with SuperTuxCard, you will see that it doesn't work. And in those cases where it doesn't work, you can add --dlsym, and then it should work in most scenarios. yeah, and as you can see, there's a lot of information, so you can also customize what you want to see. vkBasalt is a Vulkan post-processing layer, so you can apply some graphic post-processing effects to your Vulkan application. The development is not very active, so it's almost done by one person. He is still active though, so he responds to issues and so on, but yeah, not a lot of development. Currently, Upstream bundles all Vulkan headers, but yeah, I'm already working to resolve that. And the Debian state is pretty much like MangoHud, but just without the copyright problem. So we're working Arch independent package despite the Vulkan Layer library location problem. And yeah, I'm only really looking for a sponsor. So if you happen to have some free review time, give it a go. So let me now showcase vkBasalt. So we start off with taking a look at the config. So you want to have reshade installed or at some location for all the shaders. Yeah, you have to give the location to the shaders, and then right here you can say the effects you want. Right now I just took some to make it pretty visible, the difference, and you can also give a hotkey to enable or disable it. So yeah, here's just vkcube, and as you can see, yeah, it looks a little bit different, but yeah, it's not really a good showcase application, so I want to showcase it with satisfactory. So first we need to do on the properties, we need to set the launch options. So yeah, we just put the environment variable here. And also, if you're using a Proton game, a game with Proton, don't use 5.13-1. It won't work because it uses the Steam Linux runtime. So yeah, we'll use 5.0.10. So this is how it looks by default. Actually, pretty decent looking game. And if I now press the home key, I can enable it. And as you can see, it really changes the visuals of the game. I mean, yeah, this effect is a little bit too much, but yeah, I think if you tweak around with it, you can get some pretty decent results. And as you can see, if you look at the FPS counter, there's not a huge impact between enable or disabling it. There's a couple of FPS, but if you have a decent enough graphics card, yeah, and CPU, it shouldn't be that much of a problem, also depending on the game, of course. So now that we talked about MangoHud and vkBasalt, it's worth mentioning GOverlay. So that's a graphical configuration utility for MangoHud and vkBasalt, and also Replace Sorcery, which I won't talk about in this talk. It's written in Pascal with Lutris, so that's very uncommon. Yeah, which makes it a little bit hard to contribute, even though I actually learned Pascal. It's not the most common language, and currently there are two issues upstream, at least from a Debian point of view. So we kind of don't get it to output a position-independent executable, even though all the flags are actually set, and I also don't get it to have fortified libc functions. Also, it currently still uses GTK2, however, there's a PR to get it to Qt5, so hopefully that's going to be fixed soon. Yeah, the Debian state is that there is a working package. Yeah, if someone knows Pascal and wants to help to fix the PIA problem, yeah, you're welcome to help, else lintian will complain. Also, Replace Sorcery is not packaged, which isn't that big of a problem, but yeah, the current version 0.4 is on Mentors, and I'm looking for a sponsor. So here's the MangoHud window in GOverlay. So in the middle you see a small preview. It isn't actually a proper preview, as you can see, but it does the job good enough. So for example, if I add and click on the option here, you will see them appear and disappear. And yeah, we can also change the position. So for example, if I would put it in the bottom left, we can save it here, we can run it, and it will run to demos to see, so we can see how it looks in real life. Let's revert that. And here's the vkBasalt page. So here, when you press sync, you will sync your Git repository with Reshade, and you can add certain effects. So for example, if I want bloom and I know the good old vignette, I can add it, save it, run it, and you will see it actually changes the config appropriately. Here would be the window for Replace Sorcery, but yeah, I currently haven't looked into packaging it. And one note, I wouldn't recommend using the global enable, at least for MangoHud and vkBasalt, because they set the environment variable into your bash RC, and that can mess around with system applications as well. So better don't do it. Next up, Piper. That's a graphical configuration utility for peripherals, mainly mice, but we also recently included support for keyboards. And yeah, it uses the libratbag daemon. So yeah, both the projects are maintained by the same team. The Upstream state is I'm actually in the team, but we only do basic maintenance. And yeah, we don't really. The problem in Piper, especially in Piper, is that there is a lack of knowledge about the code base. So the person who created it left the project, and there is only one other person who really knows the code, and he doesn't have that much time. So help is wanted, especially to review PRs in libratbag, because that's the major blocker for new functionality in Piper as well. Also, especially for Piper, we need SVGs for supported devices in the libratbag, so that we can display them in the UI and it feels more natural. The Debian state is that there is already a package for about a year. It was my first package, and it has about 137 popcon users as of yesterday. So here you see the resolutions page of Piper. You can change the USB report rate in case your mouse supports it, and you can also change the DPI. So here my mouse supports 5 resolutions, but I'll only have one enabled. If we click on it, you have a slider with which you can change it to any value your mouse supports, or almost any value. Yeah, these 0 DPIs means that it is not enabled. It's actually not supported yet in Piper-libratbag. There is a pending PR for me, but yeah, that needs to be reviewed. So if you're bored, take a look at it. It's mostly systemd stuff that needs to be figured out. If we look at the buttons page, you can see here the buttons. It looks a little bit like the Logitech software. So if we want to edit this button, you'll have a list of buttons, clicks more like, so your typical mouse clicks, some special clicks like wheel up and down. And you can also send a keystroke. Now, if I'll send, let's say, just H, it will work. We'll see it right now. So you have to hit apply to send it actually to the mouse. And if I press this, it will send an H just if you would press it on the keyboard. But sometimes it doesn't work. So if we would do something like hi, yeah, it won't work because my mouse kind of doesn't support it. You just set this back, and here's the LED page. I only have one LED on my mouse. I can change it to, let's say, cycling with effect duration, brightness, the same with breathing. I can also disable the LED. Yeah. The next project I want to talk about is gamemode. It's a program or project to optimize the performance of games on demand. It's basically a background daemon bundled with a library. So you preload the library into your game, and the library will call the daemon. The daemon will switch the CPU governor, change the process priority, and yeah, some other minor performance tweaks. And it's actually developed from Feral Interactive. They are known for Linux ports of games, so for example the Life is Strange franchise. Upstream is basically dead. So there's one guy from Feral who still answers to PRs and issues, but there basically no new code contributions, not from Feral and also not from outsiders. Yeah, there are two notable Upstream issues or improvement ideas. So one is the that there is a special mode for iGPUs, which are in laptops, to not unlock the full power, because that maybe throttles the internal GPU. If you let the CPU suck as much power as it wants, and there's some performance problem. And the other one is to use masty events instead of threads to make it a little bit more streamlined. The Debian state is that it is already in Debian since about 2 years. It has 318 popcon users. The only thing that's really worth mentioning here is that Ubuntu is still on an old version, and they actually have custom patches applied because of inih. gamemode is in in main in Ubuntu, but inih is not. And actually there's a reason for it, at least I believe, because on Debian inih is heavily vendorized. I actually disagree with the maintainer, but yeah, that's not the topic of this talk. So now we're at the point where the Debian state of the project is way worse. So one interesting project I found was vkDevicechooser. So it basically forces to use a specific physical device for any Vulkan application. So yeah, that's pretty useful if you have let's say a laptop with an iGPU and an external GPU, or you have multiple GPUs in your PC. So let's say you have an Intel CPU with an iGPU and an additional graphics card, and you want to use both of them. Upstream is basically dead, which isn't really a problem. I mean, it works, and it doesn't really need any more features. However, it lacks the Vulkan Layer library location workaround. I'll talk about it later. Actually, for the Debian package, it's pretty much easy to do. I just didn't have the time yet. It's not a complicated project, doesn't have a lot of dependencies. But yeah, I actually need to write up the workaround. Yeah, probably implement it upstream, but yeah, I just didn't have the time. It's not a high priority for me right now. Next up is OpenRGB. So OpenRGB is actually a cool project, I think. So it's an open source RGB lighting control software, graphical UI. It's cross-platform for both Linux and Windows, and vendor independent. So everyone can write a driver for any vendor without using their software. So it needs to be fully open source. I haven't taken a proper look at the development, mainly because it is cross-platform, and here we come to the Debian state. It bundles a lot of libs upstream because it also builds for Windows. There actually is a Debian D already, but d/copyright is empty, and I guess because it's rather complicated to write one up. So yeah, if I will ever tackle this, then it's probably the best to write up a script to create a separate source tarball for building it on Debian or Linux in general. Next project I found randomly kind of is Oversteer. It's a graphical utility to configure steering wheels for racing games. The development looks kind of active. Again, I haven't taken a deep look. Yeah, it looks pretty cool, but I didn't have the time to package it yet, and also I don't have a steering wheel to test it actually. So yeah, not a high priority on my to-do list, but in case you have a steering wheel and you think it's a cool project, would check it out. Then the next project is GameHub. So GameHub, to put it short, it's basically like Lutris but different. It has the same purpose, so one program for a library for all your games, and an easy way to install them. It was very active when I actually wanted to package it, but now it doesn't look that active. Yeah, I actually wanted to do it at some point, but I noticed that it bundles the Flatpak, some Flatpak libraries in the source tarball, so yeah, that would require a separate source tarball. Also, when I checked it out yesterday again, It also bundles some questionable icons, for example, for Discord, for YouTube. So we kind of have the same problem like with Lutris. And yeah, right now I don't have a lot of motivation to package it. But yeah, some people actually prefer it over Lutris. So yeah, in case you're interested in the project. Also, a project which I think is pretty cool, at least from the idea, is noise storage. So basically it aims to be a clone of RTX Voice, which uses AI to reduce background noises, and not just like your low quality audio noise, but also stuff like keyboard sounds, for example, or when you are outside in a noisy environment with people talking, let's say at a train station. Just filters all this out, and so that you can just hear the voice. So basically for gamers or streamers, whatever. Yeah, Upstream looks rather active, but it's written in Go, and I basically don't have any Go experience. So I will probably not try to package it, at least for now. Also, it bundles RN noise, or basically a wrapper for R noise. R noise is from Mozilla, and that's the library behind the suppression. And the last utility I want to cover in this talk is vkmark. So it's a Vulkan benchmark suite. Just from looking at the commit history, it doesn't look that active. But yeah, I can't really talk much about it because I just discovered it actually yesterday. But yeah, I'll probably try to package it. It looks quite cool. So let me now explain the Vulkan Layer library location problem I talked about before. So on Vulkan you can have Vulkan layers. So basically extensions. They go in a shared folder and they're basically JSON files, and you can specify in them specific library, which basically is your layer. And either you do it by inserting the full path to the library, or by a library file name inside the shared library folder. So for example, for MangoHud, this library is called libmangohud.so. So these layers, they don't have a so version, because essentially they work like a private lib. Like their only use case is to be loaded from these JSON files. But they also kind of need to be public for the Vulkan loader. So it's kind of a conflict with the Debian policy. So the current Debian policy for private libraries recommends placing them into user lib and then subdirectory, for example mangohud-libmangohud.so. So this actually has two problems. So for one, it's not multi-arch capable at all, and also the second problem is that when you now would insert this into your JSON file, that it would only work for one arch specifically. And for Vulkan overlays, we definitely don't want it, especially when you want to use them in games, because what you want is that when I'm on AMD 64 and I have a 32-bit game, and I want to enable my Vulkan layer, then I want the layer to choose the correct library, which usually would work if we would not specify the path explicitly and just put it inside the shared library folder. So I came up with a workaround. So I put the libraries just in a normal shared library folder with an additional directory before it. So yeah, so for example, use rlib AMD64 MangoHud /lib mangohud.so. And in the JSON file, we can do what you can see here in the presentation. It's the \$lib, and this is an undocumented workaround, because the library will be preloaded with LD, and LD will replace the \$lib with exactly the arch of the program. So it works. But I actually read up the Vulkan spec at some point to check if there's some proper solution, but not really. It says like either an explicit path or just a library name. So yeah, what's the solution to this? I don't know. The current workaround works. It's not really that beautiful. Probably all there are basically two options. One is changing the Debian policy to make exceptions to these Vulkan layers and let them live in the shared library folders without lintian going completely crazy, or change the Vulkan loader, so to create a special folder. So for example, use our libarch and then /Vulkan, and then we put in all libraries in there, and the Vulkan loader will add a appropriate LD preload path. That would be one solution. Another problem for gaming utilities is the game section in Debian. So it really suggests that in this section there are really only games and not gaming utilities. So if you do anything which is not in anything in there which doesn't have the binary in /games, lintian will give annoying warnings. So for example, for GOverlay, if I would put it on the game section, I actually have to move the binary to /games. But GOverlay is not really a game. It kind of doesn't belong there. So to fix these lintian warnings, you either overwrite them, you patch the installation to put it into a different folder, or you change the section to MISC. All three of which are, in my opinion, pretty ugly. So I propose to add a new section, a gaming section, which basically just allows binaries in /bin and is for gaming tools. So for example, also Steam has the same problem. For example, Steam is in /user/games, if I remember correctly, to work around it. But Steam, it isn't really a game. The other problem is the games category in .desktop files. So the desktop menu specification from freesup.org specifies categories for .desktop files, and they are really only targeted towards games. So there is a category called games, but in that category of subcategories, but they only are some game genres which are all not fitting for utilities, and there isn't really a space for gaming utilities elsewhere in these categories. So my proposal is to add a new gaming category, and just get rid of the games category and do it as a sub category, or at least add to the games category a subcategory for utilities. But the problem is I don't really have time to discuss this or really get involved into it, and it's not really that important after all. But it's just worth mentioning that these days I have the feeling that there are more and more gaming utilities for people that game on Linux, but traditionally when all these standards for categories were made, that the only thing considered back then were games and not utilities for gamings. So just wanted to say that. Else, this was my talk. In case you have any questions about the packages or want to help out, you can always contact me with my email. And else I want to give a quick attribution to the background. It's from a Debian 11 artwork proposal. It's the Gradient Motion team by Alex Marcas, GPLv2. I think it looks amazing, and the font is Procyono, which is public domain.
Oh, thank you, Stephan, for the talk. And now it's time for the Q&A. I see that most of the questions from the IRC and the Etherpad are already been answered. So, like, if you have a few questions which haven't been answered yet, please feel free to write them on the IRC or the Etherpad, and we'll let Stephan answer them. So. Okay, I see most of the questions are answered, and let's end this talk. Any parting words, Stephan, or anything you want to add, where to contact you for any further talk or confirmation?
So yeah, you can just write me an email. I think that's the easiest. Yeah, Stephan Lachnit at protonmail.com, or you can just search any of the packages on Salsa, and you will find my email eventually.
Cool. So thank you, Stephan, for the amazing talk and all the works with the Debian gaming utils, as well as Jathan for directing this talk. So thank you and see you around.